The next gentleman on the stage is our last. He does a graveyard shift, Eric Hill from Sweco. And for those of you who don't know, Sweco stands for Sweco, and Eric will tell you more about it.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Ewan. He says this every night, and I tell him every night what Sweco is. Sweco is a multidisciplinary consultancy. It's from Sweden, hence Swek, and has offices throughout Western Europe. My background, I've been working in civil engineering, highway engineering for about 35 years. In about 2002, work wasn't that great, so I decided I thought I'd join the police and stick my finger in, my big toe in. Joined as a special, got one colleague sitting down at the front here as well who remembers that. Just to see what it was like, thinking about a career change, but I was so late in my career that it meant a major drop in my salary, and my wife said no. But I enjoyed the policing part because, like my day job with the road safety engineering, you're seeing things from a different perspective. I'm also a member of IM, I drive a car. My confession, I'm not a biker. So Motorcycle Law Scotland invite me here just to tick the equality, diversity and inclusion box. Right, I'm going to explain a little bit about what engineering, highway engineering, and what my profession is, road safety engineering, and how it's different. So if we take the bowl of fruit, highway engineering is very much like lots of other disciplines of engineering, the same as the engineering that puts together these wonderful bikes that are sitting here. They're made up of lots of little different components that all complement each other and work with each other, which is great, and they produce something. For the engineers, each one of these little components is quite easy to deal with because it serves a purpose, and it behaves in a certain way, and it works, and we know what will happen if you put a pressure on it, a load on it, or whatever. So it's quite, I'm going to say it's quite simple, but engineers in the audience will go, no, it's not, right? But generally speaking, it's quite straightforward. Road safety engineering is that discipline away from my colleagues that do the highway stuff, that build roads, maintain the roads and that. What we are doing is we're looking at people that are using the road. So similar to other engineering disciplines, we can pull bits out, like little bits of fruit on the top, and we can see them, and that may relate to a road alignment, it may relate to weather conditions, light conditions and so on. But underneath it, there's a big slushy, and that's everybody sitting in here. Because we're engineering for people to use a road. And although we're all made up the same way, we're all made up differently. So we'll have very competent riders here who will ride competently most of the time, but sometimes they might have a little lapse. They'll have a bad day. We'll have average riders that put in a good performance, might put in a poorer performance. We're all affected by different things, whether it be emotions, it could be medication that you're on. You may not be aware that the medication you take is affecting your performance. So when we do a road safety engineering, we're looking at all these different elements, because there's not a road user, right? There's not a grape in the fruit bowl and we say that's a road user. No, but we're all different and we all treat things differently. So we get a bit more like psychology because we're trying to work out not so much what we expect, what people should be doing, but what we expect people to do. So the statistics, we've got the top of the screen, that's good. Right, Ali had better statistics than me because he gets them straight from the police. This is straight off the Department from Transport's casualty analysis tool. It's on a website, you can search it, and like Thomas's books that you say if you're really bored, you want something to read, you can go on the internet and look at this and pull out stats. But when we look at collisions across Great Britain, it's slightly different to what's happening in Scotland, and the biggest difference is where things are happening. In Scotland, it is very much a rural motorcycle collision issue with road deaths. And the reason I've only got road deaths and I haven't counted slight injuries or serious injuries is because we know that serious and slight injuries are massively underreported. From what the police statistics collect, if you went to the NHS, you'll get a bigger figure. If you went to the insurance companies and asked how many injury claims do you have, it'll be even bigger. So the only really reliable source I have for data on performance is road deaths, which is why we show it here. Exactly the same as what Inspector Alistair, I'll give him a Sunday name, was saying earlier, right? Bends are a problem. overtaking's a problem. The funny one down the bottom is that going ahead over, we talk about lies, damn lies, and statistics. The going ahead over means it can mean a variety of things, okay? And we try not to get too hung up on it, but we do realise that bends and overtaking are issues. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some incidents, well, not so much incidents, but layouts that we deal with, and try to give you an understanding how we look at things. So we've got our choice of routes I'm going to show you. So the one on the left is left, the one in the middle is the A5 in North Wales, and the one on the right is Mick's favourite road, the A9 at Dunfermline. Right, a show of hands as bikers. What sort of route you would prefer to be on? The left, show of hands? Yep, quite good. Show of hands for the A5? Yeah, 2. And for the A9 between Perth and Inverness? Right, I think we've got 1. Okay. Right. As we'll appreciate, they've got different performances as far as road safety is concerned, and we'll look at these. But what I want to get across to you tonight, right, is see that road over the left. It came about pre-18th century. It was basically a cart track. It was then improved by General Wade, General Caulfield with our armies, and they're made, and get this is the important part, they're made for marching armies, pack horses, small carts that are travelling at about 2 miles per hour maximum. Right? How fast do you go over these roads? We're getting more into modern times. We've got Thomas Telford improving the A5, the main road for taking the mail from London to Dublin via Holyhead. And what he's done is that he's taken out a lot of the sharp bends, and they've taken out a lot of the little crests and smoothed the gradients out, because this is the age of speed. We've now got the mail coach, which is probably doing 10 to 15 mile an hour. And what speed are we doing? Yeah, all right. And then finally, we're into the modern age. We've got the A9. Most of it was designed, built in the 1980s, 70s, 80s, so quite modern standards compared with the other two. Currently being upgraded again. And we have a design manual for roads and bridges, which is still a current document, and it's updated all the time. And that's our bread and butter in road design. And you'll see there is that we've got lovely big sweeping curves, we've got nice flat gradients, we've got nice wide verges, good visibilities across the bends, nothing hard to hit at the side. There's no trees right at the side of the road, there's no large pillars at the side of the road. A much, much safer, efficient road. But not very interesting if you enjoy driving and riding, on these other roads. This is very functional. It's made for the fast movement of goods up and down in a safe manner. So, in our highlands, most of our roads go back to the 17th, 18th century, and we realised that, and motor traffic was coming along and they were getting a bit faster. So this guy, Mr. Wardboy, came up with a report, and it was, how do we sign the roads? So we're getting away from these old cast iron signs that you see in museums now. Reflectorised road signs that shine at night. We've got standard shapes of road signs that let you understand whether it's a warning, regulation, information, so on. We've got standard symbols. So on all these roads that we like going on, they've got lots of hazards, which generally don't exist on the more modern roads. So we provide a way to warn everybody what's happening. We looked to the ground and we looked at the road markings. And we started putting markings down to show you where the edge of the road is, where the middle of the road is, when there's a hazard or hazards on the road. Places where we don't want you to cross into the opposing lane. Hatched areas to keep you separate from a certain hazard. And standard lane markings on dual carriageway, multi-lane roads, so we don't clash with each other. So it's great. And you've got to ask yourself, when we've spent all that money all over these years doing all that, we're thinking, how are we still getting things wrong? Because roads are a factor in collisions. There's no denying it. So, we mentioned military roads. The A83 at Strone Point near Inveraray, a few people might know it. This is before it was improved. If you knew what the old bend was like, you would realise it was a double apex bend. And there was lots of motorcycle collisions occurring there. And the problem was probably associated with the fact that somebody would go and hot into the first apex thinking that was it, and then find suddenly the road would tighten again. And our highways engineers at the times doing their signs and lines and so on, they've got a warning line there, which is great, and they've put up the chevrons. But all the way around that bend, they have the chevrons at equal spacing. So going into a psychology, if you were going into a bend and you saw chevrons at equal spacing, would you be expecting a constant radius or a change in radius? Right. So there could have been a quick fix there by grouping the chevrons to highlight where the point's apex are. Other issues we have is 828, the A828 from Connell to Ballachulish. So you've just come past Port Appin, you come up the hill, you pass that lovely wee cafe on the left-hand side, which was shut last year, sadly. And you're dropping back down to sea level and you have this bend. So the eagle eyes among you will notice that there's a chevron just behind the vegetation on the left. So this was quite near the beginning of summer when this picture was taken. Again, it's a double apex. So there's an issue there, you know, people can come in, and the problem with chevron, it's quite right to have a chevron at the second apex, but the difficulty being is that it's not visible at the first apex or before the first apex to allow people to line themselves to get into the right place. Anybody here at last year's roadshows? One or two, you'll recognise the picture. Right, this was a location where we had two fatal motorcycle accidents. In both cases, the motorcyclists were overtaken in the direction of travel that we're looking at. It's on the A82, it's just past the Glenetive Road Junction, and you're heading towards Glencoe Village. I don't know if yeah, it's working great. That's where Devil Staircase, West Highland Way, heads up the hill. And we can see the road all the way here. There's a warning line on the road. So for those who weren't here last year, what would you think the warning line's for? Dodgy road, right. In most cases, you're coming up to another bend, aren't you? Fair enough. What you don't see is that there's a little blind spot there. And in both cases, that blind spot was enough to hide a vehicle approaching. Somebody's made a decision to go for an overtake based on what they thought was really good visibility, and they both come to grief, sadly. And you think, well, here's the issue. The warning line can mean a multitude of things, not just one single feature. In this case, our remedy, we erected a sign to say there's a hidden dip there, just to qualify why that warning marking was there, so people come around there and go, instead of thinking, oh, it's just for a bend, there's another hazard there. But it's a good thing to keep in mind. You know, you see that hazard warning line, it may not be for the obvious hazard. There may be something else. Prime road markings, I expect most people have seen them up in the West Highlands now. Right, Dr. Alex Steadman leading this. It's a trial with Transport Scotland. And what we do is we've erected these signs here. Couldn't get that much clearer, apologise for that. It's got a 1950s motorcycle. We don't know why they still use a 1950s motorcycle on these signs, but and the idea being is that as a motorcyclist is approaching the bends, is that there'd be a series of markings and they're expected to pass through the gap to put them in a better position to negotiate the left-hand bend. What we find, if you've done your advanced training, and you got this a lot when we first put them down, is that they're saying, well, I would be further out. Unless there's a bus coming in, right? So the marking has to reach that compromise. The marking can't say, go out there, because the marking doesn't have anything written on it saying, come here, however, right? So it's done in a way, so it's quite conservative, but it's to get the right idea. When we consider our wonderful climate here, the rain, the ice, road markings, how happy are you guys at additional road markings going down on the road? Right, a story about road markings. Recently I crossed another public island for work, waiting for my colleague to pick me up, and it was a little bit icy in the morning, but the road was fine. I saw the road marking and I thought, I'll stand on that. Right, it was shimmying across the road marking. So there's a problem with road markings, and there's a problem with putting road markings down on our surfaces. What I can tell you is that if you're riding in Scotland, in the northwest of Scotland, on a trunk road, wherever you see these chevron markings to lead you into a bend, they're called the prime markings. They are made with a material which is a stick-down material, and it has a surface grip which is similar to the surrounding road surface. So it's not your normal thermoplastic slippery stuff. It's actually got a lot of grip in it. So don't worry about that. You know, so if you're not sticking by them, don't be concerned that there's a potential loss of grip there. They're actually very good. There we go. So I'm going to go back to that corner in the A828 with this knowledge that we've got these road markings. We now can't see that second chevron, which is up there somewhere. This was one of the first trial sites, and you can see the markings there, and there's another marking here. And what the markings are doing is that they're keeping you out wide for that first apex, so you're in a better place to take the second apex, rather than taking almost a racing line and cutting that apex and finding yourself coming out in a bad place. So that's how the system's been designed to work. This is one of the better examples. There's a lot of corners where I question it a bit why it's there, but this is certainly one of the better locations. Safety barriers. We've got issues with safety barriers on motorcyclists. Cheese wire, I hear a groan in the crowd, and if you say that, the cheese wire barrier. Right, it's interesting because we all have perceptions about things. And this goes for smart motorways and all these things, right? Is that somebody comes out with an idea, right, and you're immediately thinking, oh, road, right? And it's interesting when you actually research the data that comes back over time, because there is no evidence to say that that barrier is any worse than any other form of barrier in relation to motorcyclist injuries, because on the most part, a motorcyclist either goes over the top of it or they hit the posts. And the big problem we have with barriers that we've found across the networks we've been working on is the blunt force trauma of a motorcyclist coming off their bike, sliding on the ground and hitting a barrier post. Right, it's that sudden stop, it does lots and lots of damage. So what we have, we're back at Strone Point after the improvement. What we have is these panels underneath. These ones, it's called bike guard. I think that's actually a trade name. Other systems exist that do the same. And they're non-structural in the sense that they make no difference to the performance of that barrier in relation to how we're tested. So safety barriers are all got to meet certain tests. It generally means propelling a car in at about 110 kilometres an hour at a 20-degree angle on a flat surface. A 1,500 kilogram car, which is quite small nowadays, has all these elements. It's a test, right? We can't say it's exactly in real life because nobody really gets that opportunity to adjust their speed and angle to hit the barrier exactly as they want to. But it's a test so you can compare barriers and you can see, it gives the manufacturer something to go on. So it doesn't affect that at all, but what it does make a difference to is that the motorcyclists, if they hit that bit there, it's going to deflect the motorcyclist, and the impact is going to be much less. You're not going to have this blunt force that you get from hitting the pole. And finally, here's something that's kind of unrelated, but it is related to what we do. When I worked with Bear Scotland in the Northwest Unit, and we had lots of motorcycle incidents, I looked at crash stats. And I found a trend that on our fatalities, they tend to happen in the early afternoon. So before this presentation for the 21 to 23 data, I've got the hour of the day along the top, we've got the day of the week, we've got the month. And see when it goes red, that's where you've got the most instances. And what surprised me was that it never changed. So when I was looking at it in Bear about 10 years ago, I was getting that same graphic. So we've had lots of discussions about what it is. A lot of it we've reckoned is possibly because it's after lunchtime. People have maybe, it's that siesta moment, their metabolism's changing. We don't know, but it could just be fatigue. If people getting out early by that time of the day, skill set coming down. But it's something to be aware of, because we're seeing it, and it's more than just a fluke, it's a trend. So if you are out riding, just be aware in the afternoon, there just seems to be that higher risk. I don't know why, but you may have your own ideas on it. And that's all from me. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you. The mic bearers are running down to the front. Now we've got one.
Yeah, more of an observation around the 3 o'clock. Interestingly, I did a course up at Knockhill. It was like, I think it was a race experience one. It was an all-day affair anyway. And basically the instructor said, when we were going out on track, he said, I can guarantee you between 2:30 and 3:30, you guys will likely have a problem because you'll switch off. So that's the time that they actually stated to us as participants to be extremely careful. And lo and behold, I had my off and almost had an off, but thankfully saved it. And it was exactly on 3 o'clock. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone else with questions?
Sticky as well on the road.
No. Slow signs, right, okay. I've got a colleague from work sitting in the audience as well, so he'll be laughing at the moment because we've been doing a bit of work on this. The specification for lining, you can actually specify your skid resistance on lining. But the problem with it is that the specification just says it has to be a minimum of this level. And what's not happening is a lot of highway engineers are just keeping to that specification. They're not putting in the brain bit to say, you know what, in a place where there's going to be braking or turning or anything, we need to lift that skid resistance up. Because it's like when we do surfacing, we put the high friction stuff at the problems, and then the road surface between the problems has a lesser grip value because it doesn't need it, because it's not where things are happening. So, yeah, at the moment, yeah, it can be quite slippery. Designers can specify a higher level of grip, and that's what we're working on just now, is trying to get it to happen more often. Funny you should say that. We were employed by Transport Scotland to do the road safety audits on that. And the road safety audit is a process whereby you look at somebody's design and then we're not doing a technical check on it, we're looking at it from a road user's perspective. And it's an issue on a number of these sites where we've highlighted this, where we've got a road marking. I think there's one at Butterbridge at Rest Thankful. When you go over to Rest Thankful, you come down the other side, you've got the bridge with a bend on the left. If you're coming in the opposite direction to that bend, there's an arrow, a straight ahead arrow, more or less right after the marking. And we raise it, so Transport Scotland know about it, but I think what they do is monitor it, because when you start burning road markings off, it creates other issues. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree. It's a problem for road users, cyclists, motorcyclists. Is this related to patch the pothole repair material, or are we talking about the surface dressing? The surface dressing, right. I used to look after this in North East Fife many years ago. You have to be on top of the contractor to sweep it, because you're always are going to get loose materials, and it's got to just be swept and swept and swept until you've got a point. Because what that surface is doing, it's restoring the grip quality to the surface. So the reason it's done in many cases is because there's a loss of grip in the surface. If the main road structure is fine, what they will do is it will surface dress. But you're right, it is an issue.
So it's supposed to be swept?
No, it's supposed to be swept. Okay.
Can I just add into that? It is a problem. It's a cheap way of relaying a surface in a road, and it relies on road users to bed in the chips. As Eric quite rightly says, it should be swept. If you have an off at that kind of location, one of the things we would say to you is, have a look for signage. There should be signs telling you that the road has recently been surface dressed. I appreciate you might be lying in the ditch, but maybe your mates could walk back. If there are signs telling you to be careful, then probably the answer is you should have been more careful. Right. Right. I totally understand that, yes, but from our perspective, we have successfully pursued claims against local authorities and contractors where people have come off and there hasn't been any signage, either because it was never put out to begin with or because it was taken away too quickly. So I can't account for each individual riding round a bend on that kind of surface and coming off. But what I would say is, from our perspective, try and get some photographic evidence of the depth of the chips, where are they on the road surface, if it's safe to do so, and whether there's signage. No, no, neither am I. Yeah. So, yeah.
It should be properly swept.
It should be swept, yes. There's rules surrounding that, yeah. Okay, we've got one more question down here.
You were on about the barriers, cheese wires, Ardenco. It appears now that they seem to be taking all the cheese wires out when they're redoing central reservations. It's going back to the Ardenco again.
Yeah.
A90, right along for between Perth, Dundee, and then up the Forfar Road as well.
Yeah, barriers have got a lifespan, and Transport Scotland's got a budget to do it. Local authorities less so, but Transport Scotland has it. When they're replacing the barrier system, there's a couple of issues with the wire rope barriers. One of them is what we call the working with, it's how much the barrier deflects when it's hit. And in many cases, it's too big, which means that you could potentially have a vehicle strain into opposing lane. So in some places, maybe shouldn't have been used in the first place. The other thing with a wire barrier, and it's a maintenance issue, and it's a safety issue too, that if somebody hits that wire barrier, it detensions about 500 metres worth of barrier, which means if you get another vehicle hitting that barrier, it's not going to respond the way it should. So, you know, the normal beam barriers that you see, if a bit gets hit, the rest of the barrier is still going to work. It's just going to be the bit that's hit, it's failed. You're not going to have to go and retension a full, you know, half a kilometre's worth on it. Okay.
Thanks, Eric.